Hello interwebs, welcome to Let's Review. Today we are having a look at the MSI Z270 SLI Plus. So this is a slightly out of date board at the time of recording this. You know, Kaby Lake has been out for a while now. However, building Kaby Lake will cost you a bit extra. It was when I spec'd this computer the other night, going up to Kaby Lake was going to cost another sort of 60 or 70 pounds for the equivalent chip. So in this instance, I decided to stay within budget. I decided to drop it down to Kaby Lake, and this board came up. Normally, this is probably in the regions of about 140, 150 pounds. But again, because it's an old, out of date one, this one was down at 100 pounds. So this is a lot of motherboard for just 100 pounds. So let's take this bad boy out of the box and take a look at it. So this is hopefully going to be one of MSI's upper class boards. It doesn't have much in the way of RGB to my knowledge, so you're not going to get many shiny lights, but for people who are looking for a sensible quality motherboard, this should be it. So let's take a look at that. As you can see, this is all black and silver, none of this edgy black and red rubbish. And because it's the Pro series, not the Gamer series, they're putting on what you want, nothing more, nothing less. So let's do a quick tour of this board and see what we've got here. So let's just adjust the camera. That again. Right, let's go clockwise around this board. So let's start, the bit that I first look at when I'm looking at motherboards is vCore. So this section here and here, this is the power supply to the CPU. So arguably one of the most important sections of the board. And the more phases you've got in your vCore, the better. It means a more stable power supply to the CPU, which means the CPU can load up and unload much faster and much more rapidly without risk of crashing or any of that ilk. And it also means it's going to overclock better, so good for future-proofing. And because we have got an i5K series going into this, we've got a 7600K going into this, we will have an overclockable CPU going in there. So we've got, in this case, we've got what, 6 plus 4, so we've got 10-phase vCore here, which is a really good start. A lot of the cheap boards have got normally about 8 phases, sometimes as low as 6 on some of the cheaper boards, and you'll find there's just a little bit up the top here without having the 2 banks, but here we've got a nice big 10-phase into the CPU. Then going around, we've got 4 slots, DDR4, obviously with all the XMP profiles and all that jazz. This hold down, it's got this sort of this chrome grill around the edge of it. Is that through hole? Yeah, it is. So this chrome surround around the DDR slots, that is all through hole, goes straight through the motherboard. So that reduces the load of inserting and removing the DDR modules. So that means that this thing is really tough. It's going to take a lot of bashing about. And also, these slots, these are really nice. I have never felt DDR slots open and shut like that. That's a really satisfying click. I'm digging it. So we've also got debug LEDs up here. Little thing, really helpful when you've got problems with the computer. Just having those LEDs there telling you how far into post it's gotten. Very, very helpful. Then we've got dual USB 3 front output. We've got a vertically mounted one and a 90-degree connector there. So you can have 4 front USB ports and you can connect to either or both of them. Then we've got a selection of Sata ports, which interestingly, again, we've got vertically mounted ones and 90-degree mounted ones. So again, you can use whichever ones are more useful for the layout. Only 6 ports, which is lower than average. Normally I'd expect to see 8, or at least Sata Express as well. But let's face it, who actually has 6 Sata devices plugged into their computer these days? So not something I particularly care about either. So then moving around to the bottom, BIOS area, nothing fancy down here. MSI don't run dual BIOSes or anything great like that. So we've got just a bog standard BIOS chip down there. I would really like to see MSI start implementing a dual BIOS system. It's not very often you need it, but when you need it, you need it. And considering, like, hell, I've seen ASRock boards that have got dual BIOS now. It's not exclusive to Gigabyte boards. I'd really like to see MSI getting on that bandwagon and sticking in a dual BIOS on these things. So moving across the slots, you'll notice we've got 2 M2 slots. Super cool. I'm digging that a lot because that just means that you can get your 250 gig SSD now. and keep your costs down and add in another 256 or even a 512 later on to expand your storage, and then potentially go driveless in the computer, which is a pipe dream of mine. So yeah, we've got 2 of those M2 slots. We'll be using one of them. Then obviously we've got 2 PCI Express slots. This is SLI, as you can see. Unfortunately, this fella is only 8 times. We don't have dual 16 lanes here. However, that is a privilege reserved for only the most expensive boards, so I'm not particularly surprised. However, it doesn't matter if you only have 8 lanes on a slot. That is not going to hold your graphics card back. Really don't care about that. Not bothered. So yeah, we've got a selection of one-time slots as well. And then we've got an extra PCI Express slot down here. That is also got 8 lanes in it. So you can stick in a 4 times or an 8 times card in there and not be bottlenecked. So moving on round to the audio circuit, it's okay. We've got the token number of filtering caps around here. The cheap boards tend to only have 4 or 6. We've got some extra ones on there. And we've also got a really good selection of SND filtering there as well. The trick with filtering capacitors is variety. You don't want lots of the same, you want lots of different capacitors. So yeah, we've got a very good selection there. It's not the best I've seen, but it's better than standard. So yeah, that's okay. I wouldn't call it premium, it's basically good, not crap. And we have 6 4-pin fan headers as well. We've got 2 for the CPU, and then we've got another 4 proper 4-pin PWM fan headers. So that is also a really good sign. The cheaper motherboards, they go cheap. You get the 4-pin on your CPUs, and then all your system fans will be 3-pinners. So again, premium fan headers all around as well. Then finally, up onto the I/O plate, got a nice I/O shield here. It's okay, it's plastic, it's not metal. Not that it needs to be metal, but it does just make the top left of the board look a little bit nicer. It stops you just having those empty slots up there. On the back of the motherboard, we've got 4 times USB 3 slots. We've got 2 USB 2 slots, and we've got USB 3.1. We've got an A-type and a C-type slot. We've also got DVI and HDMI there. No display port, but let's face it, if you're using a motherboard like this, you're going to have a graphics card as well, so not particularly fussed there. More importantly, we do have Intel Pro Wireless. None of this killer network rubbish. It's proper Intel. So that'll be nice for the driver front. And then we've got our analog audio out there as well. So I think that concludes our tour of the board. Let's get this thing fitted and see how it runs. So we do actually have some backlighting on this motherboard. You can see now I've got it turned on. We've got some lights around the edges here in the corners. And we've got a little bit down the side here for the audio circuit as well. The audio circuit is got a border line on it, but where that's shining through the circuit board is kind of yellowed out. The edges ones are a nice cool white. However, there's not really enough of them for it to be useful. It's a nice touch, but there's not enough of those LEDs to actually create a useful lighting effect. You'd have to do some fairly notable case mods to really bring out those LEDs, and to be honest, I don't really see the point in putting them there if you're only going to put, like, well, I think there's 6 of them actually doing the backlighting, and we've got a bit more light down here just because the audio circuit lighting is doing that bit extra. So it's a bit of a gimmick, to be honest. I would have, if they put, like, you know, 6 LEDs down each side of it and a couple along the bottoms kind of thing, you'd have a really nice backlight around the board. That would look ace. But yeah, as it is, there's not enough of those LEDs to really make a difference. However, despite them being not particularly effective, I do appreciate the fact that all of the LEDs are actually white and not just red, because a lot of motherboards, even boards from MSI and other companies where it's all black and silver or black and white, they still use red LEDs on them, which just clash horribly if you're trying to do a lighting theme that's other than red. And this is quite a frustration for me, considering my gaming computer at home, for example, is blue themed. And it's extremely difficult to find anything that suits that because everything's all black and red these days. So even though the LEDs aren't particularly effective, I do appreciate them just not being red for once. But backlighting aside though, the board does look really nice in the case. The black and silver looks really good. I'm not a big fan of the sort of the MLG Pro Gamer go faster stripes thing that most motherboards have going on. and it's quite a relief to see a professional looking motherboard, if you see what I mean. This board will just look pretty whatever you put it in. So yeah, I appreciate that. I think it looks fantastic. Let's do a quick tour around the BIOS. Okay, so let's have a look. So this BIOS that we've loaded into by default, classic MSI layout. We've got the boot priority across the top, all the specs up the top here, and just sort of a main screen in the middle for the easy mode setup. So for just generally just getting the lay of the setup of the computer, it's fairly decent. We've also got some quick hotkeys in the bottom right here for some common stuff that you might want to turn on and off. Nothing particularly interesting. So I'm going to switch over to advanced mode, and we're going to do a tour of what we have actually got available. So once again, we've got the Efi boot screen available here, which is, again, it's a little bit nerdy, but it's kind of cool. I like it. It makes a change from having some kind of, you know, monster truck or F1 car or something like that, which has just always annoyed me. It annoys me when people do that. I don't like the parallels between computers and cars. I'm not a fan. Well, for design aspects anyway. It's not a race car, it's a computer. Anyway, right, so let's have a look through. Let's start in the top left and see what we've got. So the first option here in settings, this is just normal stuff that you're going to find on all motherboards. It's the just general hardware setup, power options, SATA configuration, stuff like that. I've had a look through here. It's all the usual guff. There's nothing of interest to see here. It is a very good selection of options. Everything is there. If you're wondering if this motherboard has it, it has it, basically. You've got ERP control. You've got SATA hot swap. You've got disable onboard audio, onboard network interface, stuff like that. It's all in there, so we don't need to go through that. And likewise, we've got trusted computing setups, chassis intrusion. It's all there, basically. So we'll skip past that bit. Not very interesting. Let's look at the overclocking options. So firstly, it looks like we've got a normal and an expert mode here. So let's just quickly see what the normal setting gives us. So we can set our CPU ratio. That's that doesn't give me a selection menu when I click on it. Can I just type in an option there? Let's just try typing in 30. Huh. That's fun. I typed in a new... Wow, okay. Fine. I typed in a new multiplier and it just immediately applied that and restarted. And it didn't apply it, so I've no idea what just happened. So let's just try that again. Was that for real? Advanced, overclocking, CPU ratio. Okay, let's just try. So our CPU runs at 3.8 native. It's going to be 100 megahertz base speed with a 38 multiplier. Let's just try dialing in a 36 multiplier. So we're going to downclock to 3.6 gigahertz. Enter. So it's telling me what it's going to do up there. Okay. We're going to get another reset there? No? I don't know what that was all about. Okay. Okay. Right, okay. Can we stick that back to auto? No? Huh. I'm pressing enter to select. It's not allowing me to change it. So the settings on this are kind of clunky. Can I just overwrite that? What about 30? Yeah, you can overwrite it. That's fine. And auto? Yeah, you can type in auto. So it's kind of annoying that you don't get a selection menu, which makes it a little bit clunky. Normally I like to zip around with the cursor keys and the enter key, or even the mouse even, but I can't even do that. So the interface is a little bit strange, but I'm not heartbroken. We'll get used to that. So yeah, ring ratios, MISC settings, cool. We can manually disable turbo and other such things in there. Manually disable speed step, which is helpful if you're really trying to push for high clocks. You can tell the CPU to stay on maximum clock speed all the time. This is terrible for power saving, so you don't want to turn this on unless you really have a reason to. But interesting to know that it's there. Cool. Whoops. Let's just roll up to the top there. So we can set our base clock as well. We can set our DRAM XMP profiles here. It's all on the same menu. We've got all our voltage here as well. A very common complaint I have about some modern BIOSes is that they put clock speeds and voltages on two completely separate menus, which is really annoying because you change all of this stuff on the fly as you're going when you're overclocking something. So having a BIOS where they put it on separate pages is very frustrating. So you have to do a lot of toing and froing between those pages. So likewise, again, there's no menu option for this. So they're really going full on. You know, you've got to type in the number you want. There's no increments that you can select. So what about plus and minus? Can I plus and minus? Well, we can plus and minus those. That's slightly better. We just can't see the range. So next, let's have a look at the hardware monitor section. So I have already had a look through this when I set up this motherboard for the build that we're testing it in, and it's a good setup in here. We've got, as you can see, we've got 6 channels in total. We've got 2 for the CPU, one with the second one being labeled as actually pump, which is cool. So it's sort of designed for people who are using all-in-one water coolers. And for each channel here, we can set it to PWM mode or DC mode. So for those of you who don't know, PWM is pulse width modulation. So a 4-pin fan, which is speed controlled by turning it on and off rapidly with a pulse width modulated signal. So the advantages of PWM is your fan can go down to extremely low rotation speeds without stalling because it has full torque at 0 RPM. Whereas with DC fan control, you control the speed of the fan by lowering the voltage to it. However, most fans, like for example a standard 120mm fan, it will actually stall at about sort of 5 or 6 volts or so. So if you go down, as soon as you go down to about 5 or 6 volts, you're going to find that the bottom half of that speed control is completely useless because the fan just stops spinning because there's not enough torque. So PWM is superior, but it costs a bit more for your fans. However, PWM fans are worth every penny. I recommend buying them. On cheaper motherboards, you will usually find that only the first 2 or maybe the first 3 channels have PWM control, but even when they're 4-pin headers. However, on this one, we've got 6 channels, all with PWM controls, and each one of them can have an individual fan curve on it. So as you can see, I can go PWM, smart fan mode, and I can dial in a custom fan curve here to be whatever I want. So we can have this stay at a flat speed and then just jump up at the last minute. And it's quite an intuitive interface as well. So if I click and drag this button here, as you can see, we've got so let me see. So at 10 degrees along the bottom there, we will be at 20% fan speed, a 20% duty cycle. And then when we get up to say 30 degrees, we'll step it up to a 30% duty cycle, and so on. And I can just put in a curve. And as we increase in temperature, generally you want, as the name suggests, a curve where your fan is going to slowly ramp up to maximum speed. So in this instance, on the CPU fan, I've set a fairly aggressive fan curve here. So we're starting out at basically 0 on low mode, and then we're going to ramp that up to a normal speed as the CPU gets into normal operating range. And then we've got these 2 at the top end that are just getting up into the sort of 60 and 70 degree area, where, as you can see, once we get up to the high temperatures, we're going to step this fan up to high speed to get that under control. Now, because I'm using 3-pin fans here, I'm using DC control, which is why we're operating by voltage, not by PWM. So that's just an example of what you can do with these. And it is on a per fan basis. And also, which is super cool as well, each of these channels, I can also tie it to either the CPU temperature or the system temperature. So, for example, if you're using a water cooler with 4 fans on it because you're bonkers or something like that, you can set all of them to be tied to the CPU, and then you can have your 2 other system fans be tied to the system temperature. So you can tell the motherboard to control the fans to react on ambient case temperature or specifically how hot your CPU is. And depending on what the fan is and what you're doing with it is going to dictate which one you'd rather it be tied to. So in my case, I've tied everything to the CPU because generally speaking, there's not going to be a whole lot of system temperature. And if your CPU is hot, your system is probably going to be hot. So I generally put everything on the CPU. System temperature, not quite as reliable. It doesn't change a whole lot. So that is the hardware monitor. Then we've also got all full speed, all default, and all cancel there as well. So you can change it en masse. The only thing you can't do, which would be really fun, is you cannot copy fan profiles. What would be really handy is if you could set a fan profile and like on system 1, say you could say copy from whatever fan. Because, for example, if I had more fans in this computer and I wanted to put this system fan profile that I've put in here, if I want to copy that to system fans 3 through 1, I have to dial it in manually on each one. So, I mean, it's not the end of the world. You're not going to be changing these all the time, but it would be nice to be able to do that. But not heartbroken. However, overall, again, fantastic level of control all around. So that pretty much sums it up. We've also got MSI's Natty Board Explorer here, which is it's a bit of a novelty, but whatever. It essentially shows you what's plugged in. So if I hover over the back there, you can see I've got a HDMI output, which, oh, that's not connected. I think it's just active. Then here you can see we've got my Logitech USB keyboard plugged in. So it shows you what's active and blah, blah, blah. So that's, there we go. If I plug the Ethernet cable in properly, that will probably light up. There we go. Gigabit Ethernet now connected. So it shows you what's there. I think it's a bit of a novelty, but it's kind of cool. One RAM module installed. It's not bad. And then finally, in the top right here, we've got the OC profile controls. Now, I'm not sure if these are going to save the entire BIOS setup or just your overclocking settings. So you know what? Let's do a test on that and find out. I'm going to go over to Settings, Advanced, Integrated Peripherals. And we're just going to turn on SATA hot plug for port 1 and 2. And we're going to set in just an underclock. We're going to set the CPU down to 36 multiplier, which is going to drop our CPU speed from 3800 to 3600. And let's save and exit. And then what we'll do, we'll save that profile, and then we'll reset it to defaults. Then we'll load that profile, and we'll see if it loads the overclock profile and the BIOS profile as well. Because that would be quite a nice touch if it can do that. Whoops, I missed the BIOS prompt there. Spam that delete key. All right, so OC profile, overclocking profile 1, save overclocking profile. And that's kind of nice. We can also set a name for it as well, which is quite impressive. So yeah, right, so that is saved. And so now, let's go to overclocking profile 2. Oh, we can't load that because there's nothing there. So now what we'll do is we'll change the settings again. So let's go, whoops, if I can aim with my mouse. Let's now change that to 3 and 4 are enabled. So again, this is just serial ATA hot swapping that I'm enabling and disabling. It's a completely innocuous setting, so it's not going to change anything. And let's change our thing back to 38. And we're going to save. And then once we've rebooted now, we'll go and load our previous overclocking profile, and we'll see if those hot swap options have changed. OC profile, load profile 1. Okay, right, so overclock, so it has reloaded our 36 multiplier, advanced, integrated options, and it has loaded our SATA hot plug options. So the OC profile, this is a full BIOS profile save. So it does save all your options, which is very handy because for certain overclocking things, you may change other settings in the BIOS to support your overclock or stabilize your overclock. So that's nice. And interestingly, I also did some tests regarding resetting the BIOS as well, and I discovered that loading the default settings does not reset your BIOS profiles. Hitting the BIOS reset jumper, so the hardware reset jumper on the motherboard, does not reset your profiles. And even removing the RTC battery, so the 2032 coin cell, even removing that did not clear the overclocking profiles either. So these profiles will survive through to the bitter end. So I'm not quite sure how useful that is. I'm not very happy about the concept of not having a true BIOS reset on this thing. However, generally speaking, most of the time, if you're having problems booting, just loading the default profile is probably going to fix your issue anyway. But that is interesting to know that these profiles will survive the nuclear apocalypse of resetting your BIOS. Anyway, so that is the BIOS. So yeah, very good BIOS, very comprehensive. The one thing that it's not going to have, which I'm expecting it not to have, which I'm going to check now, we're going to drop into M-Flash mode. So this is for the BIOS updating from a flash drive, and I'm guessing that this is going to be flash drive only. A feature that I really want to see more motherboards have, which I've only seen on ASRock boards of all things, is updating the BIOS from the internet, which is a party trick that ASRock boards do, where you plug in your Ethernet cable and it will automatically download the latest BIOS for your motherboard and then allow you to flash it. And that's just really handy. It saves you doing the song and dance with the flash drive. Yeah, as predicted, this is from flash drive only. So yeah, such is. But other than that, this is quite a good looking BIOS update. They've actually stylized this very nice, which gives you confidence. We can also see they've added in CPU fan speed and temperature as well, just so you can just keep an eye on things while you're actually flashing. So good BIOS all around, nice and informative. So yeah, overall, I'm quite happy with this motherboard. This is a really nice board. I'd recommend looking for that if you're looking for a slightly premium board, and especially if you're looking for a motherboard that is attractive overall, but not just obnoxious with all the lights. It's not gaudy or anything like that. So yeah, I think we're all done here. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. I'll see you all next time. Goodbye for now.